G'day everyone, Dan here. Welcome to North Queensland Barbecue and Brewing. Today I'm doing something a little bit different. I'm going to talk about the short magazine Enfield rifle. Not that in depth, but I'll go into them just a touch. These two belong to me, so these are my two SMLEs. I also have a number 4 Mark II that's been FTR'd downstairs. It's a American made Savage one. It's actually quite a good rifle, and I might even do another video on that. If you've subscribed to my channel for a while, the first two videos I ever released were one on the Mad Minute at the SSAA, which is the Sporting Shooters Association of Australia here, and a part of the service rifle competition we actually shoot a Mad Minute. It's I think 50 seconds or 52 seconds. You have 10 rounds to shoot. Start off with 5 rounds in the rifle and then load a stripper clip with another 5 rounds. That's to accommodate the Mauser shooters, because all Mausers, as you know, have a 5-round internal magazine rather than a detachable 10-round box magazine like the SMLE. So basically these are my two here. I had to take them out today, that's why I'm doing the video, and we've had a lot of rain, so I'm cleaning them up, oiling them, and they started to get a little bit of mould on the timber, which I had to clean up and just give some oil to, some timber oil, clean them up. This one here, this is my favourite here. This is a 1942 Lithgow made SMLE number 1 Mark III asterisk. The other one here is a 1908 Birmingham Small Arms number 1 Mark III. It's just an SHTLE shortly Enfield, but it's a bit of a bastard rifle basically. I think it's been thrown together. It's really dinged up, and it probably went through the First World War, I would say. There's a lot of dings on it, and there's a bit of patchwork done. And yeah, it's basically just an interesting rifle. I picked it up for $300 odd, I think, in 2011 or 12 down at Home Hill, actually, south of Ayr. But this one here, this is the one I'll start off with. This here is, like I said, a 1942 short magazine Enfield rifle. So if you know anything about Enfield rifles, the original ones were what were known as the long toms, but the number 1 Mark ones, the longer rifles, nearly 49, 50 inches long. And there was the carbine Enfields as well. So they were shorter, the cavalry carbines. And this was designed, I think, in 1907 from memory. And they started production 1907, 1908. So this was a combination of the two rifles, the long tom and the cavalry carbine basically version, and they came up with a stock standard version, the number 1 Mark III, without the asterisks. So this one here in particular, being made in Lithgow, is an Australian made rifle. So this rifle would have been made during World War II, obviously being stamped 1942. This would have been a wartime expedient version of the weapon itself, so it would have been produced in 1942 at the height of the Kokoda campaigns up in Papua New Guinea, and especially most of the New Guinea campaigns. So this one here, it's a fairly stock standard rifle. I've got the World War II sling on it. This is just the canvas sling. I got this given to me by a friend of mine I shoot service rifle with. There's nothing particularly special about it. It's all matching numbers on everything except the nose cone. So the nose cone, which was very common for Australian rifles, and I'll show you some more in-depth footage of the nose cone in a minute, but this has the holes cut out of the side. It's not a solid nose cone like this other rifle here. And that was done by armourers during the Second World War and even in the late 40s, and the reason they did that was to let light onto the front sight. So the reason I know all this, or I've been able to know it, is the research here. This book here is a brilliant book. It's written by Charles R. Stratton, and I bought this at Queensland Gun Exchange and Fishing, I think in about 2009 or 10. I've had it for years, and this goes into everything you need to know for someone who just owns a rifle like me. I own a couple. There's nothing special about these rifles. They're just stock standard SMLEs. They're not really collectible, I suppose. They are, but they're not really of high value because they're mismatched and they're rifles essentially. But this book here is brilliant. This will go into everything you need to know about the SMLE rifles, the number 1 Mark 1s and the Mark 3s. There is another good bit of literature I've got here, which is the Enfield rifle, and this is by Ian Skennerton. Now Ian Skennerton is pretty much the mastermind of everything you could need to know about 303 rifles, from the number 1 Mark 1s through the number 5 jungle carbines, number 4 Mark 1s, number 4 Mark 2s. Everything about everything to do with Enfield rifles is in here. So Enfield, an interesting history, obviously, if you know much. It's got a Lee Attree. And James Paris Lee invented the box magazine, I believe, from memory. But the Lee action here is a cock on close action. So that there's cocked, and if I hold the trigger down and close that, it's uncocked. So he came up with this action, and obviously short being a shorter rifle than the long Tom, Lee, short magazine fed, SMLE, magazine fed, Lee action and Enfield. So the Enfield rifles were originally produced and developed at the Royal Small Arms factory in Enfield in England. So that's where it gets its name from. The Lee action, shorter rifle, magazine fed, Enfield rifle factory. So this one is matching numbers, like I said, on the bolt. The rear sight has matching number, the action's matching number, but the nose cone isn't, and which is, a bit of a shame, but it is what it is. So we'll come in here and we'll give you a closer look at this rifle here so you can have a good look. So generally speaking, you'll find the manufacturing stamps on this part, the collar here. So on every SMLE rifle, doesn't matter whether it's a number 1 Mark 1, number 1 Mark 3, number 1 Mark 3 asterisks, number 4s, you'll generally find the markings there. So this one here has MA. There is some speculation as to what that means. Lithgow SMLE 3 asterisk 1942. So that's this rifle here. That's the actual year of manufacture. What you'll get here, you'll see here is the serial number on the bolt, and it's also there on the action. It's also stamped underneath. Generally speaking, you'll find the serial number stamp on the bottom side here underneath for that. On the 1908 BSA, this is an interesting rifle in regards to the fact that it is very old, but it's mix matched, I believe. I picked it up cheap, but ER, I think it's Edward Regal, and he was just before King George, I believe. I'll have to double check that. But Birmingham Small Arms Company, 1908, SHTLE, number 3. So shortly Enfield, number 3. This one's interesting in the fact that it comes with a lot of different features. So that's the magazine cut off. I'll go a lot more in depth into this, that they change a lot. So first things first, we'll have a look at these bolts, and you can see straight away there's a very big difference between the bolts. This is the BSA and this is the Lithgow. So obviously 1908 made this cocking handle, when it's shut into the rifle here, I can actually have that loaded with a bullet down the spout, and I can actually pull that to cock the weapon. So I can also hold it and now uncock the weapon as well. So this was the first iteration of the bolts that came out. I think they were actually on the long toms as well, the number 1 Mark ones. They had the cocking piece like this. Now this one here, being a 42 Lithgow, was obviously a lot cheaper to make a bolt head like that. It still has grips on it, so you can still grip onto that. You can see the grooves there. So you can still grip onto that and cock the rifle. But it would have been cheaper to manufacture that bolt cocking piece like that. The bolt heads themselves, they're exactly the same. They've both got an extractor. These are they're a push feed action. So like a modern rifle, like anything like an AR-15, I suppose, or any sort of modern bolt action where you've just got push feed, you can throw a bullet in and this will cock over the round and just clip over the top. Unlike a Mauser action, which is a control feed, it has a much bigger extractor core, and the bullet, when it comes out of the magazine, actually comes up and slots into that extractor and then feeds into the chamber of the rifle. So that's the big difference between I've got a Mauser downstairs, a 6.5x55, and I don't have it here, so I won't be able to show you the difference, but there is a fair difference. They say they're a lot more accurate, but that's up to the person pulling the trigger really to see how accurate they are. A lot of people shooting service rifle don't like the SMLE. They use Swedish Mausers. Mine's an M38, so it's a carbine version, 24-inch, whereas a lot of guys use the 28-inch. Yeah, I think it's up to the shooter. These both shoot well, and I can shoot them fairly accurately at 300 yards, 300 metres. Tends to get a bit harder, but at 100, 200 metres, this thing, especially this 42, is absolutely brilliant. So this one here, another big difference, this has a magazine cut-off. So originally intended, basically when these were developed, they didn't want soldiers wasting ammunition on the battlefield. So the magazine cut off, basically you could have a magazine with 10 rounds in it, ready to fire, but you could do single round loading only. So an officer on the battlefield could order his troops to basically single round load and fire when ordered to fire. Whereas the 42, does not have the magazine cut off. It's been gotten rid of. It was seen not to be necessary and a waste of space and manufacturing, so they got rid of them. You'll find a lot of actions, there'll be a lot of 303s that'll come out in 1916 especially, that have receivers that are still milled out for the magazine cutoff, and that's just that they'd already made them the year before, or they kept manufacturing them but they didn't put the magazine cutoff in them. So, you know, it's a cool little bit of history and it does look cool on the rifle, but it's completely unnecessary. So this one here too, a big difference between this earlier model SMLE and my 42 is this one has a windage adjustable rear sight on it. So you can see that there, you've actually got this windage knob here to adjust across in increments. So that, you know, that was taken out and the sights were fixed. Pre-World War I, you know, when they wanted to shoot across long distances after the experiences of the Boer War, they'd be able to use those to basically adjust for windage. But during World War I, they were seen not to be necessary. So the windage sight, and you can probably hopefully see that knob, was taken off and you were given a fixed sight. So I've actually got, I can actually show you a close-up of a fixed sight because I've got one, that one's fixed. This here is a spare sight that I've had for years. So that one there is fixed as well. There's no screw at the back, it's just completely fixed in the sides. I think this one was originally windage adjustable because it's been cut off there, and it's slightly different to this one here, which doesn't have anything on the sides here, whereas I think this one originally, it's threaded underneath, and it's yeah, I got it just with some other parts from an old bloke I knew, and he gave it to me. So yeah, that's what you look like close up now that it's fixed. One of the interesting things about the 42 Lithgow over the 1908 BSA too, apart from the front sight, is that a lot of things are milled on it to take the weight down. So this stock, inside of the stock on the 1908 Birmingham small arms, it's hollow, and that's to reduce weight. So whereas this stock on the 42 Lithgow is completely solid, this one's actually hollow to take weight down. Another thing you'll notice too is these ears here on the sight protector are also being milled out to reduce weight. So yeah, rather interesting, just small details when they first started manufacturing them as opposed to the wartime versions of the rifle that weren't milled out. Once again, I've got a spare set of ears here that came, so these aren't milled out, they're just stock standard. That sits down, there's actually a thing in there that will sit and that'll screw through. Yeah, under the barrel, sits in. But yeah, I can actually do a video on how to take this thing apart. I've taken it apart a few times. But yeah, the 42 Lithgow, not milled. So just another interesting variation to the rifle. Once again now, so the nose cone here, you can see that nose cone. And that has been taken, has been drilled out basically. Now, the book by Stratton here that I've got actually speaks a little bit in detail about that, and it's very specific to Australian rifles. Australian rifles like armourers would take off the original nose cones and put these new ones on. Now I can sort of understand why. If you're fighting up in Papua New Guinea, in Malaya, in the jungles, Borneo, as much light as you can let onto that front sight is better. Whereas, you know, if you're fighting an open country like the British were in France, you know, World War I, World War II, you're not really worried about that because there's probably a lot more light, you know, getting through onto the rifle sight because it's not being hidden by thick, dense jungle canopy. So that's the 42 Lithgow nose cone, and like I said, it's a bit disappointing. It's not original, but it is actually historically accurate as to what they did. The BSA, on the other hand, is enclosed, and this one's a matching number. It's actually got matching numbers on the nose cone, the action. The timber actually here, I don't know if you'll be able to see that, but there's actually the matching numbers there on the timber underneath there, and there is stamping here as well. This is where the trigger is. There's actually some stamping in there as well. It won't show up on camera, I don't think. There is some stamping and matching numbers there as well. So this one's all matching on the bolt, nose cone, action. This piece of rear timber here has been replaced at some stage. This actually as well, very interestingly, has the volley sights. So this has a volley sight on it, and yeah, I don't know if they've been added later or whether they were original or not. I picked this rifle up, like I said, in Home Hill, and the guy I bought it off was 90 years of age, so he had it just sitting out the back for years. So yeah, they're just a few little interesting points for the SMLE rifle and the difference between the two that I have. Okay, so hopefully you got a little bit from that. Like I said, they're both actually really good rifles. I love the things. They have such a unique look about them. And being a box magazine fed rifle, you know, they were the first bolt action military rifle in the world to have a 10-round magazine. All the Mausers, the European Mauser rifles, had 5-round internal magazines, and you know, to be honest, you can't really beat like a 6.5 or 55 Swedish Mauser. You know, the accuracy of that round, just, you know, it was so far ahead of its time. And even now, I'd probably pick a 6.5 Swede over a 308 Winchester any day of the week. It's such a phenomenal round. And the 8mm Mauser, you know, the 303, unfortunately, being a rimmed cartridge, and I'll get one and show you in a minute, you know, did have its faults, especially when it came to loading. You know, if you did have a round sit behind another round, you know, it wouldn't close in, and that can happen. So here we have 5 303 British rounds. These are hand loads here. I've actually put 174 grain boat tails in these. The 174 grain boat tail round was actually a machine gun round developed from the Vickers machine gun, I've been told, whereas the 174 grain rifle round was actually a flat based round. A lot of people, soldiers in the war apparently, who had access to Vickers machine gun ammo, would actually take it and use it in their rifles, and they'd burn their rifles out a lot quicker. The good thing about modern cartridges is we're not using cordite. If you do ever use cordite in your 303 rifle, old rifle ammunition that's cordite, make sure you pour boiling water down the barrel after you've shot, neutralise the salts. So obviously these things were a stripper clip fed rifle, so you can load these up. There's 2 ways, and I'll give you a close up here in a minute. There's the military way and the civilian way. So this here is basically the military way. So you won't probably be able to see it. You have one case there, and then the other one's in front of it, and that one's behind, that's in front, that's behind. So essentially inside of the rifle case, inside of the stripper clip, you have this. You have one rifle bullet, and then that one's in front, and then that one's behind, and then that one's in front, and then that one's behind. So essentially that's what it looks like inside the stripper clip. If you can see how that's laid out there, it gives you a rough example. So that will actually go into the magazine, and they should fall into place quite easily. The second way of loading these is like this. So you can feed them into a magazine so they all sit on top of each other like that, but you can only fit them in one way. So if I have my stripper clip here, I go in like that, next one there, next one there, so on and so forth. And what you end up having, or should have, is all those cartridges or rifle cases sitting basically on the angle, so that will only feed into the rifle one way. It won't flip around and go both ways like the first method. So to load these via stripper clip, it's quite simple. You just basically get your bolt in, and to put your bolt in, that just slides in like that, and then this here just clips into place. That's it. The bolt head, that unscrews, and you actually have your firing pin inside there. So essentially now you've got this bridge here, the charging bridge. Now this way here, this is the second method I showed you where they're all on the angle, so I can only load that in one way. And basically just in there like that, stripper clips away. The second method here, I'll get a bit closer, this is way you can either go either way. So once again, just in there like that, and there. So I'm not actually going to continue because this is live, but now if I don't want to, obviously I can take that magazine off so I don't have to cycle every round through, and I can just peel those rounds out of that magazine. So cycling is a little bit easier, but this is going to be a lot safer to do it like this and cycle them through a live rifle. I do have some snap caps somewhere for it, but you know, once again, just a safe way of doing it. So another thing with the 3.0 as well, that's clear now, you've got your safety. So if I can cock that, that's cocked rifle, and your safety's on this side. So that there is set to fire. It's a 2-stage trigger like most military rifles. Take the pressure and then I can pull the trigger. So safe, safe. not going to fire. And the thing with that too is that if I close it, it won't cock. Now, that won't move. So on safe, you can actually have the weapon half cocked, it won't fire, and you can't take it to safe. So the old saying, the gun going off half cocked, probably comes from this, I would say, and it won't cock at all, so I have to actually fully cock that. There's actually some grooves here in the bolt. So you'll see there's a groove here and a groove here. Inside there, if that light's going to give me justice, there is a little notch that comes up here. That notch there is what locks into place in the bolt, physically stopping it from going forward. So it's actually a very good safety system. One thing I have learned is that the magazines, this one actually and this BSA, I don't think it's the original magazine that came with it. It's a little tight in the rifle. But one thing I have learned shooting these things over the years, this rifle here, I'd say this rifle magazine comes in and out easy as anything. Whereas trying to take that magazine out of that into this one, it's actually not too bad. Probably because I've loosened it up over the years. What I did find to start with 10, 12 years ago when I bought these rifles was that the magazines were a bit hard to get in. The number 4 magazine is slightly different again. Number 4 Mark II, it has the bolt. You won't get a bolt from a number 4 into an SMLE. Just won't happen. So, yeah, totally different rifles. It's really important as well with these rifles. Now you've got to remember that they're a fairly strong action, but compared to a lot of other rifles, Mauser actions, they're not as strong. But you know, respect for these things, they will handle a fairly high load. But if you're hand loading for them, always stick within the powder specifications for the powders you're using. So if you're using ADI powders, stick to what they say. Don't compress your loads, don't overload them, and just be safe. You know, this is an 80-year-old rifle here, and this is a 120-year-old rifle here, roughly, or 116-year-old rifle. So you know, be careful with them. Another thing is too, because these are head spaced. So being a rimmed cartridge, and if you don't know much about rifle, there's a rimmed cartridge, obviously being a 303. There's a rim on it, it's not rimless like a 308. Being a rimmed cartridge, the head spacing is going off that rim. So the head spacing's in the head here, and they've obviously been machined, each head of the rifle, and that'll come off. That's actually machined and fitted to each bolt to make sure the head spacing's right. So basically that gap where that actually sits where that sits in here onto the wall where it sits, gives the spacing here for the bullet jump, and that there, once it's sitting onto there, actually will be tight. You can have different distances, in fact that might be slightly loose, and then you can have a lot of problems. So never ever take the bolt out of one 303 and put it in another thinking that it's going to work. These are older handmade rifles and machined obviously a long time ago, so each rifle was made individually with the bolt head space to that particular rifle. So once again, I can't recommend highly enough these two books that I've got, especially this one. If you just want to shoot an SMLE like I have, this book here is absolutely brilliant. It'll have everything you need to know. All the different variations of the bolts, different variations of the actions, the magazines, rear sights, front sights, nose cones, you know, everything you can need to know about these rifles is in here, especially if you're just interested in the SMLEs. If you step up and start getting into number 4s and number 5 jungle carbines and different other 303 rifles, then this book here is honestly, it's a buy. I've looked at the pictures, I've read a few different things here and there, but this one's a lot easier to read. That one goes in a lot more in depth, whereas this here is very good. So I hope you've enjoyed that. You know, just a quick going over, just a brief overview of my 303 rifles. They're a brilliant rifle. You know, Australia's a bit of a bastard, unfortunately. You know, we live in a country where, you know, these things are getting harder to get, and where we don't really have gun rights like they do in the United States. So, you know, in order to own one of these, you have to go through the Sporting Shooters Association or another registered training organisation and do a gun safety course. And then you need to have a legitimate excuse as well in Queensland. So that means that you have to be a member of a sporting club shooting club, whether it be a clay target club, whether it be you're a paying member of the Sporting Shooters Association. And they're good, you know, I go and shoot the service rifle competition out there. Another good organisation is the Shooters Union. So that also acts as a reasonable excuse to own a firearm, and they will also pay for legal fees in case anything happens, you know, that you need to have legal representation over if the police come and just say, no, you're not a fit and proper person, we're going to take your guns because you got a speeding fine. So unfortunately, you know, this is the best we can own, bolt actions, 10 magazine round capacity in Australia. We can't own some of the better, or some of the more unique sort of military firearms like they do in the US, like M1 Garands, which is a real shame. I would love nothing more to own an M1 Garand or an M1 Carbine. Not so much interested in the BARs, but definitely an M1 Garand 3006. I would love to own one. And I met a guy in Iraq years ago, I'm friends with him on Facebook, who said if I'm ever in the States, message him because he has an M1 Garand and he'd let me shoot it. But yeah, that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that video today on these SMLEs. I can probably go into them a little bit more in depth. There's a lot of videos out there. These are just mine that I have here at home that I wanted to show, and just show a few of the differences between the year models. I will do a video on the 1942 Savage, American-made number 4 Mark II. It's been FTR'd, so it's got a 6-groove barrel, I think, or 7-groove barrel. It's a brilliant rifle, beautiful barrel, beautiful Singer sewing machine sights on it and everything. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed that video, guys, and until next time, take care.